What's up, homie? I
Yo, what up, dude?
think it's funny that when we record at this exact time period, um, at in my home office, I have this like light shining in from the office window that like shines like right in my face. And
You don't have
like,
the blinds. You
well,
don't have
I
the
do, I
blinds
have the
to.
blinds closed now, but it still creates these little lines. So I can like
uh
talk like if you're watching on
Yeah.
YouTube and just like I'll just move into the light to make it look really cool.
No, it does look really cool.
Yeah.
It looks like that was my first thought is like,
It's
wow,
also like
that looks
really
really
annoying.
cool.
I'm not
I
gonna
wish
lie.
I had light shining through my windows into my eyes,
Blinding me.
uh, blinding me as I chatted. That is of all things, words that come to mind, cool is
This is a
definitely the one.
real professionally done
Yeah,
podcast
man, it
here.
looks good. Looks good. We have this offices that we like painted, paid to have professionally painted and designed in the back, and
We
we
haven't been in
default
them
to
like
our.
all summer.
I remember when we first started podcasting, dude. I remember vividly shooting podcasts from my daughter's room and like having in Maryland, and it was yeah, man, it's good stuff, dude. Hey, it's growth. It's growth.
That's right.
Um, but ideally, the quality of the conversation is not impacted by the lack of quality of your surroundings.
Fair.
Fair. So intimacy, we're jumping in intimacy month. We had a pretty, with the reflections group, it was a really good call. A lot of those dudes have never been, not all, a lot of them. Those dudes have never been exposed to diving into the topic of intimacy with Kinetic Man. It was the first go around for them, and it's a very, I think it's a very eye-opening topic, but it's also very challenging. It force you to consider relationships differently. At least it does for me every time we talk about it. And then in the main group, it was the conversation took a very interesting turn, and intentionally so, because in the past we've dove in, and we'll dive in a little bit here, what the definition and kind of how we identify as kinetic men with this word identity and just why we think of it this way. But yesterday it was on my heart, my mind, to to be very forward and challenging myself in how I assess intimacy within my relationships, and the impact of it, the true impact of it, and to challenge a group of men that have gone through this a couple times with us, to do the same. And it's pretty fascinating when you cut through even a group like Kinetic Man, where we come together to be intentional about these things and have a conversation, but if there's still some certain walls we put up, and if you don't dive into those head first, you're never going to break through, or you're never at least going to address it. And so, bringing up and challenging, like, hey, like, no kidding, what is the thing in your marriage? What is the thing in your relationship with your kids? What is the thing in your relationship with your friends that like honestly, like, you just suck at intimacy? Like, let's just be real about it, right? And what is the thing that as you're trying to, as you go through your day, there's always something in the back of your mind. Like for me, that can be if I had a rough day with the kids, or if I, got in a fight with my wife. Like there's a nagging, right? There's a nagging, and a lot of us just kind of we push that nagging down, or we push that voice down to a point where it really just impacts intimacy in general, because you get so used to that, right? Anything you do repeatedly and you create a habit for it, you get used to that. So you get used to silencing, you get used to not addressing these things, and then you kind of set a new baseline and you move forward from there. And that's not always good. If you listen to it and you address it, you can also set a new baseline of a more profound relationship, and you move on from there, right? But most of us default, I think, the other way. And so I think it's important to define this word definition, or I'm sorry, intimacy, because the when I really dove in the definition, it demystified what the word meant, and it really changed things for me in the way that I acted. So the definition of intimacy is a close familiarity or friendship, closeness, a private, cozy atmosphere. And then as you dig into the definition, the dictionary I used, because a lot of us men think of intimacy very singularly as sex, right?
Yeah.
As physical,
Yep.
something physical. And so I was kind of looking for that the definition, but the dictionary was very clear. It said euphemism, the euphemistic. So it broke it out into the euphemistic use of the word, which is an intimate act, especially sexual intercourse. And I thought that was the first time that I really looked this up. It challenged me significantly because it broke it out into the euphemism of intimacy, not part of just the regular definition. And it also forced me to get comfortable with injecting this word into all my relationships, which is where we came up with the identity of a kinetic man, which is kinetic men define and pursue intimacy to realize beautiful relationships with our spouses, amazing depth in our connection with our children, and profound meaning in our friendships, right? So intimacy is a key aspect for us and something we seek and a goal to grow intimacy in all our relationships, from our spouses and our children to our friends. And I think that for me that was profound. I'm curious for you, like did that definition as we dove into it, was it just you're like, yeah, yeah, of course, that that's the definition, or was it something that challenged you to look at things differently?
Yeah, I mean, 100% it challenged me to look at things differently. I mean, I was in that grouping of when I hear the word intimacy, I just think of sex, right? Sex with my wife. Um, or at least like touch, right? Touch and um, the sexual interactions with my spouse. And until we like really looked into defining the words and um, diving deep into that, yeah, I would say that most men don't think of having intimate relationships with their like guy friends, with like their boys, right? They wouldn't put intimacy in the category of a relationship like with your best friend, with your best buddy, and even maybe so with kids. Like I don't know if I ever looked at having an intimate relationship with my kids. That just kind of like to me sounded a little bit weird at first. Um, but I saw, as we've been talking about this over the last couple of years and doing research on it, I can't remember where I saw it, but it really kind of drove the point home for me. Was it said intimacy equals see into me, meaning, you know, look deeper inside to know who I am, right? Like see inside me, see into me equals intimacy. And if you look at it that way, obviously it's not just sex, right? It's way more than that. And like you can get to a point in your relationship with your spouse where like you're not intimate at all because you don't like, you're in this world of busy and like tasks and work and family and children and, you know, kids activities, sports activities, extracurriculars. And you just get to this place where like you're not even talking anymore. And if you are talking, you're just talking about the calendar and the kids and the whatever. And like the intimacy goes down because like you're not seeing into each other. You're not like diving deep into like meaningful, deep conversations. And I think a lot of us, and I was there, and in chapters of our marriage have been there of like that not being in place. You know, I think most guy friendships never get there. And again, with even with children, I think a lot of that never comes up because again, you're just in this life of busy mode of you know being the bus driver and taking them from school to activities to whatever, and you don't actually intentionally spend some time to like get to know each other and ask hard questions and talk about deep topics. Um, and so yeah, it's really been life changing for me to look at it differently in all of my relationships and intentionally put some actions towards those, um, to have more intimate relationships.
Yeah, I think step one is really, this is why we define it, right? Because then it opens your mind to it opens your mind to, if you understand what something is and you're committed, before even going into it, you're committed to to action it, to put action towards it, then this is something that can be really, all these topics can be really powerful if you have those two things. I'm going to define, I'm going to understand it, I want to know what it means, I want to apply it to my life, and I'm going to do something about it. And so for intimacy, step one is really understand what it means and what it means to you. One of the things that we take men through too is like, is no kidding. Most men don't do this, but what does intimacy look like for you? For you, right? Like what would the ideal intimate life look like for you in all your relationships? And that can be a baseline as well. Like understand yourself, like know thyself, and understand, okay, this is important, and I do desire, we all desire for people to see into us as well, right? Like not only do I want to do I want to be better at doing that with the important people in my life, but I want people to truly see me, and I want them to know me, and I want them to invest in that part of me, right? And I think a lot of there are men, if they're committed to friendships and hanging out, I think they can get to a place, but without the intentionality of intimacy going into it, and using the language around that, you don't have to go up to a dude and be like, "Hey, I want to be really intimate with you." But there's also, I would argue, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I would also argue that like if you are intentional enough to be able to say what that means, and to say like, I want to go on this journey. I think you're super rad, and I would love our relationship to go to a different place with your friends, right? You're that intentional. And being that intentional with your kids is like, I mean, it is different, right? And but why not? Like, why not say, hey, I want us to go on daddy, daughter, daddy, son dates. I want us to do this stuff. I want one-on-one time with you very specifically because I love you, and this is what I want for our relationship. And this is what I want for as a dad and a kid. I want us to be able to blah 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 blah. Like you're defining these things. You're very clear, you're intentional with it. Same thing with your wife. And I would argue, same thing, if you're a person of faith, same like I want an intimate relationship with my God and with Jesus. Like I
Yeah.
don't want surface level things. I want deep, profound relationships, and I want those things to be um so important to me that they make it on my calendar, and that they're things that I action intentionally put in place throughout my day, and action it, right? And make sure that those people, those, that they understand exactly where I'm coming from, because I know what being intimate means by definition. I know how it applies to my life, how I desire it to apply to my life. And then I want to do something about it. And I'll tell you that the crazy thing about intimacy, and most of these, most all these things, but until we say it and realize it, we don't necessarily recognize our influence in the realm. But it's something that we can cultivate. Like we can actively cultivate intimacy and deeply profound relationships.
100%.
It's in our power to do that,
Yep.
right?
And we
We
should
can
be
lead the
doing that.
way in that. 100% we should be doing that, because if you're just waiting for somebody else to do it, the chance are that that voice, that default that all of us have, that desire, and then we continue to repress it. Most of us live in a state that we are more accustomed to and comfortable with repressing that and silencing it than we are actioning it and putting it on our calendar, right?
Yeah.
And
And
and then it's too late. By the time you want to do something about it, a lot of times it's too late, man. The kids are gone. Maybe your spouse is gone. Um, you have a shallow relationship with your friends, and it doesn't get any easier, right? Like nobody says, man, as I get older, it's just so much easier for me to make friends. Like that's
yep.
not really a thing. And so if this is not at front of mind, then you're not able to truly be the relational person that you want to be. Because I think relationships devoid of intimacy are, it's just they're surface level, and it's really not that fulfilling. I mean, it just really isn't. It's not that, it's just not that special, right?
Yeah. Well, it takes some vulnerability, and which is a lot of times hard for men to to do. It reminds me of a conversation we had with Jared Lopes. He was on our podcast, has a community and a book called Dad Tired. And for those that aren't watching our Level Up videos, subscribe to our Level Up videos. One of the things he said, I'll spill the beans on what he said was, one of the things that he actioned in his life was like he said find two dudes, find two men and like go all in on those relationships and like get weird, like get awkward and be like, hey, David, you're my guy. Like, I want to grow this relationship. I'm committed to you to grow this relationship. I want you to be that guy in my life, right? And that could be kind of weird, right? Like, that could be kind of weird to just like go up to a friend and be like, "Hey, man, you're my guy. I'm all in on you. Like, let's make this like a really good friendship." And then our third partner, Steven, actually said he did that with the guy that he's close with, and he said he got like an amazing response and like it's really cultivated a good relationship, a close relationship with this guy. And so I think, that's an action step that we can all take. Whether it's our buddy, whether it's like having a sit down conversation with our spouse and be like, hey, it's time to like let's action item this stuff, right? Like let's sit down, let's do, the love language test and figure out, what drives us and what fills our love cup, and let's like pour into each other. Like let's make some action steps towards this stuff. Regardless of where you are in your marriage, regardless of how long you've been in a relationship, like you can always start there, right? Today we're recording this on um, our 16th, my 16th year anniversary with my bride. And it's making me like I've done the love language test a bunch of times, but I'm gonna go do it again because it changes over time. And I'm gonna ask her to for her to do it again. And we're gonna go on a date tonight and we're gonna like talk through deeper conversations than just like, what the kids are doing in the calendar and school events and stuff. So I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, man. I think and I want to encourage dudes. It may seem it's in our head, it's weird in our heads, right? It's a disconnect between our hearts and our desires. And I would even say spiritually in our souls and our head and our brain. It's initially like, oh, it's really weird to like have that conversation with a dude or whatever. But in reality, it's not. Like once you do it, it's really not because you're just all you're doing is expressing a desire to be closer to somebody that's important to you. And if
Yeah,
you're
we all want it.
and I would argue, yeah, we all want it, and that person's probably going to receive that well. If assuming you're not just picking a random dude on the street. Like I'm hoping that you have a guy, a dude, or a homie, or for your ladies, a homiette that you are close with, and it's natural that you'd both want to grow closer together. You're just being intentional and saying it and being intentional in growing that relationship. Uh, and I would argue that it's more weird to me to not do it now. Like if you really want to invest in a relationship or you want somebody to know how you feel, like how do you expect them to ever know that? Or how you expect to grow a relationship? And I would say if you're not doing it with your kids, I think it's strange. If you desire to have a deeply profound relationship with your kids, like you should tell them that. That these should not be things that you leave for other people to guess and interpret because most likely they're going to guess and misinterpret because we're not perfect and most of us are very fallible and they're going to interpret off of the things that we do that we don't necessarily want them to do. Like, oh, you know how I feel, right? Like you know exactly how I feel. Like that's like so common in arguments. Like you should have known that. Like why would I know that?
Yeah.
Like you treated me like a turd. Like by my definition of what a turd does, like you treated me like a turd. You're not in bed. Like I don't know that. And because I'm a human being, most of my thoughts are negative thoughts, not positive thoughts. So like I'm not interpreting your whatever to be just, oh, I love you. No, I don't. I don't. Because one, you didn't say it and you surely didn't show it. And so like there's a disconnect and I've interpreted it differently. Like, dude, my kids, if they're just left to interpret my actions, like I don't know what they would come up with, man. Like I'm not that great of a day on a daily basis of just a kind, loving dad. It's like they're probably left if just left to me just hoping that they will like see how much I truly love them and just absolutely adore them. Like they're not going to get that. They're going to be like, Dad, you like yelled at me again and you whatever and you ignored me and looked at your cell phone and blah blah blah, right? And then I'm like, "Oh, you know I love you. What's the evidence?"
Yeah, right.
What's the evidence? Right? And so I think most of our relationships are that way, dude. Like I think there's especially today with the devices and the distractions and all the things that take our attention. um and so here's a couple just a couple things to think about. If you look at your marriage and you feel that you're in a roommate relationship, right? And it's very far from, if you will take the time to just consider your state of mind and where you're at when you said I do, like that's an important measuring stick, right? Be like, oh man, well, I remember when I said I do 16 years ago, like I didn't feel this way. Like what changed and how do I make and how do I obviously you did something to change. You both have done something to change. How do you do something to change it back? Those are action items there. If your kids, if you look at your daily activities, are your kids competing for quality time with other things like your work or devices or whatever else it is that you're choosing to consume your time? Because there's something there, right? And this is, I say your kids, this is for anybody. It's for your friends or your spouse as well, but for kids specifically, because they need that quality time and they need that investment, particularly from from their parents, from their dads. It, if your kid time, if you have designated kid time, good on you. But if that kid time is spent in distraction, like just acknowledge it, they're just not your priority, right? Whatever the distraction, that's your priority. And so it's important to recognize that. So just take an assessment, today as you're going into whatever that time you have dedicated to your kids, if you have that. And if you don't, create that, right? Step one, create that time. Create quality time to be with them. And then friends, like just from a male perspective, like most dudes don't have friends. Like it's not David saying this, it's not Stu, it's not the Kinetic Man. It's like it's like the Surgeon General and like tons of other research you can do on dudes being lonely and this being an epidemic. And I'll just assure you that few things are as beautiful as intimacy with other dudes in a relationship. Like it's awesome, right? Um, so consider a couple of those things, and as you do, ask yourselves, hey, what does intimacy look like? Is it important to me? What does it look like in my life? Like, what can I do about it, and how can it make it on my calendar? And what are the barriers to it? Like, identify these things, ask them, look at them, identify them, and then do something about it. You can do something about it once you know what you're dealing with, right? And then you'll probably truly get to a point where you understand and desire intimacy in these different relationships, and you can take them one by one. How do I get more intimate with God? How do I get more intimate with my wife, my kids, my community, my friends? Like, how do I become more deep in relationship with all those folks around me? Because in that depth, there's a richness in life that I think we can't experience without a focus on relationship like that. And then like
Yeah.
do something about it, dude. Like put it in your calendar. Like
One of the
just start
things
incrementally doing something.
one of the things I wrote down the other day when we were recording the podcast for last Monday, we were talking about fun, friends, and being present. And one of the things I wrote down is distraction is the enemy of intimacy. If you think about it, you can never really dive into a deeper relationship and see into each other if you're just distracted all the time. And you mentioned it, like the devices, but like it could be other things besides just the devices, right? Like it's your to-do list, your checklist, your work, other things on your brain, obviously the cell phone, the computer, whatever is distracted. There's a lot of noise right now. There's a lot of noise in the world, and so like how think about how you can remove the distractions, remove the noise, so you can be more intimate in those relationships. And then the last thing that I was looking for it on my phone, I keep some quotes. We had Greg Denning on our podcast a long time ago, and this has stuck with me. He said, "Extraordinary marriages don't happen by accident." And replace marriage, replace that with like relationships. Extraordinary relationships don't happen by accident. you have to be intentional with all of these things. You have to put it on the calendar. You have to take action and do this stuff, because it's not going to happen otherwise.
Amen.
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 Good
Let
stuff,
it
brother.
be. All right, dude.
Hey,
Let's go be intimate.
I
Let's
love
go
you,
be
man.
intimate.
Hey, I love you.
I love you, bro. I love you.
See ya.
See you.